Great. Today we're talking about the seventh house in the chart, where to find Bay. If you're looking for love and you want to see how it shows up in your chart, stop worrying about sign compatibility. It's kind of BS a little bit. Okay, so we're going to talk about romantic partnership in the chart and how that shows up. What are the relevant indicators of that in the birth chart? So stay with us until after the beat drops. So, as we are digging into the chart to look at romantic partnerships, first when we look at anything in the chart, we want to start with you in the chart. So, who are you? Because honestly, before you get into a romantic partnership, you need to know who you are first. So, we start with the ascendant. What's the environment look like? Then we look at the planet that rules the ascendant. So, the chart ruler, what is the chart ruler doing? What is it aspecting? What sign is it in? What sign is it in? And what house is it in? Okay, so boom. I'm not going to go into that because I've done that on other videos on the channel. So you can feel free to go back and reflect on those. I'll post some here and below in the comments as well. But after you've done that, after you've taken a full examination of yourself and who you are in the world, then we want to look at the seventh house. Dun, dun, dun. So the seventh house is a house that covers marriage and really all forms of partnerships. So that could be your spouse, your lover. It can also look at business partnerships and the legal contracts that are associated with those. It's also, interestingly, a house of known enemies. So let's just pause on that for a second. Is it not ironic that your house of partnership is also the house of known enemies? This is because partnership is antagonistic to us as individuals. By being in a love relationship, you are having to step outside of yourself, outside of your first house of self, and over toward the seventh house of partnership. So that's a risk. Maybe you'll get somebody who gives as much as you give and you'll get something in return, but maybe you won't. So that's why, to me, it makes sense that the house of open enemies is also the seventh house of partnership. Now, you can control your own actions. You can't control those actions of your partner. So you just got to take the risk if you're going to be doing it. All right. Now, seventh house. We look at the planets that are in the seventh house. So that gives us our day-to-day experience of what our relationships or our partnerships are going to be like. So to look at those planets in the seventh house, we could see Saturn there, for example. Saturn in the seventh house could bring toils and snares because, as we've said many times before, Saturn is a planet of delays, restrictions. It's a planet of lessons learned as well. That could be a thing. Delays in love, restrictions in love, lessons learned. It's also a planet that could bring something that lasts because Saturn is a planet that governs old things. So it could bring, an old, long-lasting love your way. Could also bring a more practical love that's more tried and tested and true when you have Saturn in your seventh house. So it's not all necessarily negative. It could also bring a partner who is older toward you. And this Saturn thing that I'm mentioning as an example, that could be complicated by other factors. So if there are other planets in the seventh house, you're going to need to consider those as well. So for example, if Mars were in the seventh house, Mars is a planet that likes to cut people. Mars will come for your throat. So Mars in the seventh house could bring quarreling in relationships. It could bring actual abuse in relationships. Could also mean passion in the relationship. So there are different facets of these planets that we're having to take into account when they're located in a specific house, in this case, the seventh house. So we're seeing how these planets are impacting your relationships. So Mars in the seventh house, that could bring somebody who likes to argue with their partner just for the makeup sex. Anyway, so after seeing what's in the house, then we want to look at the planet that is ruling the house. So we look at the cusp of that house, so the little line that starts with the seventh house, to see what zodiac sign is there. And then we're going to look at the planet that rules that zodiac sign. So when we look at the ruler of that house, then we're going to look at where it is. So, what house is it located in? What sign is it in? Does it like being in the sign that it's in? Does it like being in the house that it's in? What themes are covering that house that it's in? So, if, for example, the planet that rules your seventh house is located in the ninth house of higher education, foreign travel, religion, there could be some influences on the the way your partnership goes based on that. So maybe you're meeting your partner overseas or in college or at church if you see that seventh house ruler in the ninth house. Okay. So those are just some of the things that come up with the house location of the seventh house ruler. So essentially the seventh house ruler in your chart is representing your partner. Like that's them. That's how they show up, is there. So you also, in addition to the house that they're in, the sign that they're in, you're going to want to look at the aspects that they're making to other planets. And you also want to see what other houses that same planet might be ruling. So if your seventh house ruler also rules your house of hidden enemies, that's something to take into account. Maybe they might not have your best interest in mind in the chart. But maybe they're also really into working in laboratories or like hidden places. No, no, I'm trying to be nice here with the 12th house thing. The 12th house is typically a malefic house. We can go into it someday. It's typically rough, but there are some bright sides to this dark house. We'll go into another day. But again, you want to look at the house that the seventh house ruler may also be ruling in addition to the seventh house. We'll also look at what aspects the seventh house ruler is making to other planets. Those are two things to look at so far. So we've got the house itself, we've got the ruler of the seventh house, and now we're going to look at Venus. So the seventh house stuff and the ruler of the seventh house, really that's going to give us specific information that is specific to your chart. Venus is a universal significator for love and relationships. We love it. Beauty, harmony, all of that. Love Venus. So, with that, we're going to look at Venus. We want to see what she's doing because it's going to show us what you're attracted to, what you like. A whole lot of, uh, Okay, what sign is Venus in? What house is she in? Who is she contacting by aspect? Because I've done two videos at least on Venus Uranus and Venus Neptune. So if she's making aspect to those two planets in your chart, you may want to check out those videos. I'm just saying. But if someone has Venus in Sagittarius, for example, they may be more interested in, a love that's a little bit more free, a love that's a little bit more exploratory, taking that flame of love out into the world. So there may be more of a desire to have a bit more of an open relationship because there is a desire to learn and pick up things from other people. That doesn't mean that every person with Venus in Sagittarius is going to be into having open relationships, but there's just kind of this like freedom that's associated with Sagittarius that would carry over to that person's Venus. But of course, as I said before, we would start with the seventh house and then the house ruler before we start taking on these Venus significations as well. None of these things that I share on my channel are all inclusive or exhaustive, so keep that in mind. So the last place that I would look for romance in someone's chart beyond the things I've already mentioned, and also the fifth house as well, because that is a house of pleasure. I would also look at someone's sun and moon and what aspects they're making toward each other, because the sun, moon, and their aspect can represent how partnership shows up in our charts. If you look at the sun moon midpoint, then that can tell you something about the profession of your person in your chart. So mine is an author, so maybe one day I'll meet someone who's a writer and we'll live happily ever after. We'll see. Anyway, just putting that out there. If you know anybody, what's up? So with the sun moon midpoint, that can tell us about the nature of the relationship, but it can also tell us something about you and also tell us something about the relationship between your parents as well. I actually had a client the other day who her general significators for the parents were in a trine, but the specific significators to her chart were in a square. Interestingly, her parents were divorced, yet they had an amicable relationship. So astrology can be a little bit confusing sometimes because different testimonials in the chart, different placements will often contradict each other. But life is complicated. We contradict ourselves in life. So those are things that we still have to take into consideration, even if they don't make clear sense. So that's just a little nugget for y'all. So if you want to skip all this and have somebody else do the work to show you how love shows up in your chart, feel free to reach out at homegirlastrology.com. I hope you'll like and share this video and subscribe to the channel. We love having you around. And drop a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what other types of content you'd like to see. Maybe more about love, whatever works. But thanks for being here. Peace, homies.